Yeah, we can go. Call the City Council work session of September 5th, 2018 to order at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones is absent, Jeff Gard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Dan Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss is absent. That's a quorum of council.
Okay, thank you. So the work session topics tonight are borough discussion and budget discussion. And I'll just say, council, I think our expectation is that the borough discussion is probably going to fill this whole hour up. If we happen to have a balance of time and can make some general comments on the budget, then we could. But with that, I'd like to welcome Crystal Hoke from Girdwood to give a little presentation on Girdwood's behalf on some thoughts around borough formation.
Can I run you back just 1 second?
You bet.
Just give you the background of how we got here. At the last meeting, we had a resolution 8/18/19, which is item number 16 in your agenda packet tonight, for the council to consider appropriating $20,000, but it's really $25,000 as it's rewritten in the document, funding to contribute for an economic analysis of a Prince William Sound borough. At that time, we had two on the phone, and so I think as Councilman Allison was not a supporter, was referred back to staff, I think, to give an opportunity for more members to be present to have a full discussion on this. And again, in tonight's discussion, I'll remind everyone that I think that the way I've been trying to approach issues is that to try to get us, dipping our toe in the water first and then the ankle, then the knee, giving us points where we can jump out of the process as well as stay in the process. We've talked about that with respect to Crater Lake. The first step of this process, we were invited to the first meeting, which Councilman Meyer attended and Leif attended, and now we're sort of at the second stage after that meeting. The economic analysis is an important piece of determining whether or not, just from an economic standpoint, if is this feasible for us. And so I think that's the decision point, but reminding you that if you wish to continue, there's a cost associated with it. So that with that, I'll turn it over to Crystal for her presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I am coming from the standpoint that we definitely need self-governance in Girdwood, and that's something that we kind of disappear because we're sucked into the municipality of Anchorage. That is how our groups came together, the primary reason why we came together. We've all been volunteers in this effort, in the research. I want to read, this is our newsletter that we haven't published out to everybody. There's a few tweaks that need to be fine-tuned, but I just want to read this part as it applies to the borough. The exciting part is that creating a new borough comes with choosing the kind of government we want to see, cherry-picking the best parts, keeping what works, and deleting the unnecessary. There is no set template for a borough. Everyone around our table wants to see fundamental autonomy built into the design. Other communities hear and respect our plea for autonomy, wanting and expecting the same. So I can't speak for everybody on GGA because everybody has their own opinions, but for myself, I know for sure that is something that we want to make sure that is really fundamental into the borough, is that any community that's involved in the borough, there's a lot of autonomy that's just built in, that you guys are responsible for your own town and community and how you want to manage it. And but there are reasons why groups and communities should come together to help offset costs on especially various taxes that are right now deferring to the state that we could be collecting and then using amongst our own communities in the way that we see fit. So we've done the rough numbers for Girdwood. Our finance chair is reluctant to put out those numbers because she's never done a budget on a governmental scale. She is the CFO for a multi-million-dollar corporation, but it is different than government. And so we know that we shouldn't necessarily put out our numbers to even our own community, because if something wasn't factored in that we didn't know to look for, we don't want that coming down on us. And, everybody that's participating, we actually, I think, probably have every single political group covered on our board. Like, none of us are, I mean, there's Republicans, we hired a Democrat to do our study, so we're all across the board. We're definitely not, that doesn't even come up, really. I just know that from associating for this long now. But we definitely know that there's room for improvement for Girdwood, and we pay a lot of money in taxes, and we would like to see it used in our own town. There's also as far as potential for the borough, helping for transportation, obviously, is a big one. Education is very important. We currently are with Anchorage School District. Whittier is another group who is going to participate in this economic study contingent upon Cordova participating. So they'll be putting in $10,000 if Cordova moves forward. And that will be funding the borough aspect of it, and then Girdwood is responsible for funding our portion of it. So, and we don't have a city council to go to for money, so we are fundraising, very grassroots effort. We also have been engaging with our public through a survey, Survey Monkey, and we've been posting that on our Facebook pages and getting a feel for if this is important to our community. And we had 357 people respond, which we think, I have to verify, is more than 50% of who voted in Girdwood. So it's a pretty good indication of what the community thinks. And we have got 47% was yes. Let's see, it says, do you support the idea of an independently governed city of Girdwood? 47% yes, 22% no, 31% not sure. So we feel like if we're able to provide this economic study, which shows this makes sense financially, because it really, so much of it, as much as we would love to, we want to be able to do everything on our own. If it doesn't financially make sense, it's never going to happen. And so that's why we need this economic study, is to have professionals do it. They know they know how to find those numbers. They can, we have a list of things that we're asking them to find out for us, but I'm sure that they're going to come up with additional things that we didn't even know to ask for. So we think that we'll be able to sway a lot of that 31% that's not sure, if we're able to show numbers that make sense. And so that's the bottom line, is we really would like to move forward. We want to move forward, but we need the real solid numbers from an economic analysis to know if this is a good idea or not. I think when it comes down to what it's going to cost Cordova, Whittier has 200 residents, I believe, and they're paying $10,000. So it's kind of a higher, per capita or whatever. But that would equate, getting this started would basically cost like $12.50 per resident that's in Cordova, and the potential for the return on if this were to happen could be huge. I don't know. There's kind of in a nutshell, we really don't know until it's done, but there's major potential to move forward and have pools of money that were not available before. So.
Okay, is that mostly what you had to lead in with?
Yeah,
okay. Start
hitting me with questions. If I don't know them, hopefully Brooks is gonna call in and give me some support. I have not been involved in government before. In fact, I'm I feel like the system's a little broken, so for me to even be participating in this kind of stuff is a big step for me. But I feel like if I don't engage with it, then nothing will change. And so that's another part is Girdwood governance, we're very young. We've got, there's more than 5 board members, but our 5 board members, 4 of them are are in their 30s. So we're like a younger generation that's going, we're ready to take, step up and try to take care of our town and do what we want to see done in our town. And so it's, young blood that's getting in there and mixing things up. And it's definitely a little controversial in Girdwood, but it's a good thing because, people are asking questions that they haven't done so in a long time. And I think the same thing applies to Cordova. I think this has been brought up in years past, even decades past. But until we know the numbers, there's really, and if the numbers, don't look good, everybody goes, well, we tried, it doesn't make sense, there's no reason in moving forward. But if they do make sense, it might open up huge avenues for working together, collaboration. One of the biggest reasons to collaborate, in my opinion, this is not on GGS, this is just my opinion, is for recreational development. Girdwood is a massive hub for recreation, and for instance, our bed tax goes to the muni, and that bed tax gets distributed to a third to the Visit Anchorage campaign, a third to the Denine Center debt, and then a third to the general fund. So in essence, we're getting very, very little return on all that bed tax money. So that, for instance, could go right away to a borough tourism and recreation fund, where we are marketing Prince William Sound as a destination location and recreation activities that can be found here. I think Prince William Sound, or not Prince William Sound, but Kenai is good at marketing themselves from recreation and tourism, far better than, basically anywhere else that surrounds it. So, so that would be one of the biggest things that would help, I think, for creating new possibilities that are outside fishing. I understand fishing is the largest industry here, and so it would be important to branch outside of that and, it's on bad fishing years, it's not so detrimental on the economy when you have, other things you're falling back on.
So Crystal, you mentioned GG, that's the Girdwood Governance
Girdwood
Association.
Governance Association, yeah.
And that's formed, you said it's a kind of a real broad cross-section politically. Is that just interested parties that have joined that group?
Yeah.
And then you meet periodically, and this is kind of the conclusion they came to, is looking at different options, and one of those
Yeah.
was borough.
So we hired, we knew that detaching from the municipality, it was just a huge undertaking. And all of us were wanting to look at that, but nobody had the expertise to know how to do that. So we hired Kay Brown, who was a legislator for 10 years. She's got a really good reputation, so she just knows government and has a lot of good contacts. We paid her as a private consultant to do a report for us, which explained all of it, and her suggestion was that we join the Prince William, a new potential Prince William Sound borough. So we are pursuing that because it was well received by the local boundary commission. So, and they're ultimately kind of the ones that decide. So because they thought it was a good idea, or they had good response on that, we've kind of followed that as our pathway and started reaching out to the communities, and that's why we had the first meetings to begin with. But yeah, it's definitely, interested parties. There's, we are a group of neighbors, friends, private individuals who believe the community of Girdwood deserves better. That's one of the things I'm supposed to tweak, actually. 12 of us are community activists, some new, some old to Girdwood. Within our group, you'll find 6 mothers and 3 fathers. We're comprised of a lawyer, a dirt guy, a retired CEO. Actually, the retired CEO is the old president of NANA for 30 years. He's a great asset, and he is who we're wanting to help us with the borough work group. So he's awesome. Current CEO, CFO, which is our finance chair, and 5 self-employed small business owners, and that's where I fall in there. I don't have any of those other fancy titles. And we all made a choice to get involved in the question, said the city of Girdwood be reestablished. So that's basically who we are. I mean, we're all just volunteering our time to try to figure out what we think is the best solution. I'm involved in real estate. One of the reasons why I would, if the choice is municipality versus borough, I would sway way borough, because 95% of Girdwood is not compliant with the building codes that Anchorage wants us to be. I mean, it's a ski town that is composed of ski chalets and things that are definitely not to Anchorage code. When you call if you were to call the Anchorage municipality and say, how many, building codes do you have? They probably wouldn't even know the answer, because it's so many. But if you call the borough, for instance, Matsu Borough, for instance, they told me 1 setbacks. So, for me, I believe that a personal property owner should be able to do what they want with their property, assuming that they're not going to infringe upon their neighbors. So I think less restriction is a good thing overall. I think that a town should be able to decide what those restrictions are. But when you put it on such a huge scale like Title 21 in the municipality, that to me is so many rules that it makes it almost impossible to do any development.
It's interesting because we're kind of look through the other end of the telescope. We're a Class 1 home rule city, where a borough looks like more government, not less. And so that's just to give you a little background. And so Class 1 city has all the powers. The only powers that are vested in the state are education.
You mean home rule?
Yeah, home rule. The only powers that we don't have that are vested with the state are basically none. I mean, they have laws on what our property tax limits can be and whatnot. But, so just a little background for you, I guess, also for our council, that new councilman, when we went through the strategic planning process last year, and help me out if I miss this a little bit, Alan, when we whiteboarded and looked at all the different areas that we wanted to work on strategically, one of the items that we looked at was, the potential for borough formation, because of expanding the opportunity to expand the economic base. So in my mayor's report, I'll give a verbal report on a conversation I had with Chugach and some of the feedback I've had. But so the sequencing may not be exactly what we had anticipated. I mean, that may have been a 2nd or 3rd year thing that we wanted to look into, but I guess now is the opportunity to partner with other communities to take a pretty comprehensive look, because it's always a snapshot. And I was on council when we went through a fairly good borough analysis in the early 2000s. And it really comes down to what are the current economics. So, for instance, we have an increasing population in Cordova, there's a decreasing population in Valdez, their oil revenues are drying up, our fisheries have exploded just in the 15 years since we looked at this, so that landscape looks different. And Girdwood, I don't think, is ever really in the earlier conversation. So with that, any questions, Council? Councilman Gard?
I have one. You talked about available pools of money out there. What, can you label any of these available pools of money?
I'm going to be better about Girdwood, but I know that there's going to be stuff that would apply the same kind of thing. So for Girdwood, for instance, well, I know one thing that the borough projected already, the projected borough would have tax revenue coming in from parts of the pipeline that are not currently collected already by Valdez. So there's
$3 million.
well, 3 million adds up to 3 million, adds up to 3 million, because another example would be that Girdwood has the Tesoro there, and I've heard it's the busiest in the nation, but it's for sure the busiest in the state. And 10% of every, or 10 cents on every gallon is given to the municipality, and we're wondering how many millions of dollars is that? Those are numbers that they don't report to us, and we would like to know that. So finding various pools like that where you just don't normally think of it, I think could be channeled into the borough.
But generally moving into borough formation to get all the different entities, cities, whatever, to play well together, it's generally any tax revenue that is currently being collected by a city before it goes into a borough, those taxes may pass through a borough, but they generally go right back to the community they came from instead of taking somebody's pie and taking half of it away from them when you form the borough. Like, we all go in expecting to get half of Valdez's revenues for whether it's taxation on the terminal across the way or 10 cents a gallon on every gallon of gas.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
No, I mean, generally those are pass-through dollars back to the communities they came from, or there'd be no reason for the communities to get together and start a borough. So it's like new revenues we'd be looking for to fund a borough government, which would be another layer of cost of government on top of government we already have.
So, yeah, I guess so. So there's, if the borough has responsibility for things, then they can tax. Like, I'm just trying to remember, so I grew up in Kenai. Kenai Peninsula Borough had, for instance, a 2% sales tax. So Soldotna had a 3% sales tax. So if you were inside the city limits, you paid 5% sales tax, you paid the borough and the city sales tax. If you were outside city limits, then you paid 2% on the borough sales tax, and then all that funding went in to fund the borough, but then the borough would have responsibility for some things that maybe the city didn't have to do anymore, like they might do all the garbage and collection and stuff in the whole.
And there's stuff that can be traded back and forth, but I don't, when I first thought about the concept of a borough, like a year ago or so, I started looking into it, read some of the prior reports that they'd done on it. Valdez being a cash cow kind of came off the table. Once you thought about how you'd make the pieces fit together and make everything work, and if there are some services that are taken over by the borough instead of, if we're a more interconnected and shared a road system or something like that, the borough could take over all the road maintenance or something like that, then it would make sense to share dollars from the community back into the borough, but we don't have much of that here. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff like that that's going to make it easier and less expensive to do in each community together that we aren't doing singularly because of our geographic location and connection to each other, physical connection. And I'm not trying to argue against something,
Yeah.
I'm just...
Yeah, I think this is information share. I mean, I think we can share what we think. Maybe this is a better time actually to kind of share my conversation. So Sherry Beretta called, and Sherry is one of the CEOs of Chugach Alaska Corporation, and she attended the meetings over there. And so I guess from Chugach Alaska's perspective, at least from our conversation, and I should say Sherry's perspective, is in general they oppose a borough. I would say I might be in that camp myself. Chugach Alaska owns assets. So for instance, they just opened a quarry into Titlick, a granite quarry that they would maybe have to pay excise tax. The borough could tax that. They could charge excise tax on any gravel that's extracted and so forth. But what they object to maybe more, or is some of their concerns, I should say. One concern is the size of Girdwood population base in relation to the other communities. And the question is, would Girdwood become the de facto seat of government for the borough? And that was one concern. Maybe a bigger concern, they feel like, Chugach Alaska feels like there's been some unfinished business that if there is a borough form, they would definitely want to clean up. One is that that pipeline, this portion of pipeline outside Valdez city limits that isn't taxed, there was some kind of negotiations and some takes on Chugach Alaska lands that they definitely would want to make sure that the pipeline, boundaries of the borough would, if I understood it, would include some of those assets that were kind of excluded. And then they would like to see a borough that included it was kind of loosely structured out the Chugach regional boundaries. So whether or not Girdwood was in a Prince William Sound borough, for instance, they would like to see it wrap around the Alaska or the Kenai Peninsula and pick up the Chugach, Alaska region, like clear around to like New Halen and Port. Oh gosh, what am I thinking of? As you get ahead of Kachemak Bay, that last community out there, Port Graham. From there all the way down to Yakutat, and then when Yakutat formed their borough, they extend a line way up into Chugach, Alaska region, and kind of, so they would like to look at maybe either including Yakutat in the borough or look at redefining those borough boundaries to kind of try to include some of the land that Yakutat basically drew the biggest circle of boundary commission would let them, and they pulled in a bunch of Chugach, Alaska lands. So, and of course that added that land to Yakutat's tax base. So I think those were some of her general concerns just at first blush, and so I just wanted to share those with council. So. But it sounds like in general, I think some of their concerns kind of align with, I think what I have heard in the past about, you know, for economic stability and diversification, we would definitely want to include, you know, that pump station 12 or those assets that are outside Valdez limits, but are still kind of would make sense to be in the borough boundary.
One of the other things that kind of makes me nervous about this, and these are just different viewpoints and perspectives on the world, but you have a very tourism-based economy over in Girdwood. That's not good, bad, or different, it just is. And we're a resource-based economy on fish here. You talked about Kenai having their act together very well on marketing themselves for tourism and all that. And we're having a few problems with the quote-unquote non-commercial Sports Fishing Association over there, which is basically a commercial river guide organization. And we have some issues to deal with for competition for resources, and bringing in a whole lot more tourism for that may not be, I mean, we have to sit down and decide as a community on what we want to do, but that probably may not be one of our favorite options.
Outside of fishing, what are the, you know, the industries that you guys would like to see grow?
Well, our tourism industry has been growing a lot. I mean, we have a tourism plan that we invested a lot of time and effort in the late 1990s.
Yep.
A lot of that was based on the marine highway system, which we would definitely want more political support for. It's a huge economic bonus to Anchorage, but they don't understand that. They don't understand how that fits into their economy. But we've have more of an adventure tourism. We have a heli-skiing operation, so somewhat similar to Girdwood. We have a chairlift, we have a ski hill. Sport fishing has been growing, but we've had small cruise ships. Our tourism plan has said we really don't want the large scale, 5,000 plus passengers. We don't want to have to build the infrastructure to support an industry that may come or go. And our school superintendent's here at some point here. I think we might like to hear some of his feedback and perspective. But you know, Cordova invests a lot in its schools, but really with heli-skiing, even sport fishing, our tourism has been growing over the years.
And we definitely see that continued growth. You know, my family is very involved in the guiding business, and specifically heli-ski, heli-surf. They're busy with that, and it's only getting busier.
Yeah, and the adventure tourism is what we're really targeting. And we have a fantastic Forest Service trail system and Forest Service headquarters here, and some really amazing, you know, whether it's going out skating on the ice lakes and whatnot. But one of our concerns, though, is, so we are probably going to have small cruise ship operators right now. We had one start up this summer. They hit some bumps in the road. We have another one that may be starting in 2020 or 2021. We had that business in the past, and we welcomed it, and those kind of 100 to 150 passenger vessels fit our model really well. But one of the things that we're seeing an impact on, and to kind of echo Councilman Card's comments. The Whittier Tunnel is really changing the dynamics in Prince William Sound. And that opened up a lot of access, and Whittier has really seen this, but with the expansion of their boat harbor and whatnot. I think DOT is saying that the first year there were 7,500 boats trailered through the tunnel. The next year there were 15,000. I don't even know what the numbers are now, but if you look at a heat map, the heat maps of personal use and sports catch and hunting and whatnot, like the black bear population, for instance, in Prince William Sound is collapsing. And it's bright red in Whittier, and then it just gets greener and greener, and when you get to Cordova, there's none. Because the impacts of all those private boats on that end of the sound, and you see it when you take the ferry over, there's boats everywhere, and then there's less and less and less till you get over here. But I happened to go to Board of Fish last year, and we were seeing tons of proposals like personal use crab fishery, personal use, we already have a personal use shellfish fishery. And the sheer impact of when you go into Sportsman's Warehouse in the spring, there's a stack of shrimp pots half the size of this room, and they're advertising Prince William Sound shrimp pots. The personal use take is exceeding, it's getting close to where it's knocking on the door of the commercial fishery. So what we're seeing at Board of Fish is, for instance, personal use herring proposals, personal use crab proposals. And I guess I kind of see this as a borough as maybe an opportunity. If Girdwood wasn't in the Anchorage municipality, there's a way to, I guess, not prevent that traffic, but at least derive some local economic benefit off of it in exchange for some of the impacts that it's having. So, but yeah, like I said, the sport fishing impacts, it could be, we only have 1 or 2 licensed guides in Cordova. They're licensed to catch halibut and stuff. So, that we're not, if we saw a lot of guiding growing up, we might prefer that was kind of somewhat locally based. Mm-hmm. I think that's what Councilman Guard's referring to. I grew up in Kenai, and I don't know if it's changed, but when they went from about 10 licensed river guides to over 300 just in a span of 10 years from the mid-70s to mid-80s, most of those licensed guides had a little storage cubicle with their boat and their gear in it. They would show up in the spring with college kids, take all their clients out. All their marketing, everything was done remotely back at their home state. And they would pack up in the fall with their, employees and their money and go home. And we're trying to build, more year-round type businesses. So.
And what Kenai does is fine for the Kenai, but I don't think we want it. I don't think Cordova's looking for that here.
So I'm curious, does Girdwood have like an Anchorage assembly, for instance? Do you have a seat on the assembly, your own seat, or
No.
do you have any independent representation at all, Anchorage?
No, we have an advisory board that acts as a ex officio or something, city council, and so they're just an advisory board. So they advise the mayor and the Anchorage Assembly what we want, but unless they all vote to agree with us, then.
That's the community council model they have in Anchorage.
That's for Girdwood.
But Girdwood,
It's Girdwood Board of Supervisors, and they just advise Anchorage what we want. I mean, in my opinion, so we have, like, if anybody wants to do anything in Girdwood, they go to the Girdwood Board of Supervisors. They have to, make their presentation in front of them. They will get maybe a letter of letter of non-objection.
Objection, yeah.
And then they go to the assembly. So in essence, we have to do everything twice, and then so an example of this would be, we're gonna lose our police force, and so the trooper station was closing in Girdwood. We went to Anchorage and said, we still want police, and we were on our own. And so members of the Girdwood community came together through a safety committee, and we contracted with Whittier for our police. So but even still, so now that we have the Whittier police, we need to enforce parking. Well, so now we have to put it on the ballot to ask 300,000 residents of Anchorage permission to enforce parking in Girdwood. I mean, long-term, I mean, it's okay, because Anchorage will probably be like, oh yeah, Girdwood can give parking tickets, you know, I'm sure that they'll agree with that, but at some point, there's gonna be something that Girdwood is, you know, really wants for our own community that Anchorage won't like or doesn't want or whatever, and to convince 300,000 people that don't live in your town to do something for your town is just not long-term, doesn't make sense.
So you're kind of lumped into South Anchorage's.
Yeah, so our assembly member is Hoonigan Arm and South Anchorage.
Then what about your representative and senator? Like your House representative for Girdwood?
We don't have one.
So, but that, you're part of South Anchorage
Yes,
District?
yeah, that's our.
Who is your representative now?
Jennifer John.
And then you're in Senate District.
I don't know.
I'm just
his name.
curious. That alone says something.
Yeah. Oh, John Whittleton. Sorry.
Okay.
I think those are our two, but they come to the GBOS meetings. They're, from what I've heard through through Grace, who's our secretary, that they are supportive of GGA's mission, and that, you know, they understand that we don't feel like we're necessarily getting good representation. I mean, they are our representation, but they understand that, like, we don't have our own seat. And so they're like, you know, if Girdwood wants to move forward with this, that's up to the community to decide. So they're supportive of what the community resolve is, of what we want. But we don't have somebody up there that's representing Girdwood specifically.
Manager Lehman?
When you were talking about economic development, just remind ourselves that in the strategic plan, we talked about tourism promotion, event development, ecotourism, grow and maintain our current events and festivals, improve marketing and marketing tools regionally, and additional economic development partners. As I try to look at this, to me it's backwards. You know, we're forming a county over the top of a city, and it used to be that you'd have a county and you form a city within the county in the lower 48. And so this is a bit of a different thought process for me. But what I'm trying to make sense of is, as we agree to pursue a sustainable economic model, what does the future hold for us? I know right now, today, if you were betting on it, it doesn't make sense for us. But what does it look like down the road for us when, I don't know, whatever factors beyond our control, whether they're state funding or federal funding or even local funding, collapse for us? Does it make sense for us to be involved in a process like that? Does it help us, in terms of economic development? I think I said some time back that, making assumptions on 2 flights a day and was it 3 ferries a week and 50 new people on each one of those, you could only bring 112,000 people to town in a given year anyway. I shouldn't say anyway. That's about the max you could bring. And so we're somewhere way south of that. So, what is our appetite for tourism? I know it affects the fishing balance and model and those kinds of things. But trying to keep that all in mind and then determine at this particular juncture, does it make sense for us to reach that conclusion based on the economic study or past studies that we've looked at, or what other factors do we want to use to make that decision for us on the agenda this evening? And that's kind of where I'm trying to keep it. I think the real gains for us, somebody here, or more than one of you, were saying that the tenders out in the Sound that would be available for fish tax if we had a larger boundary. I don't know the mechanics of that. I don't know if that would be available to us in terms of the fish taxing that we already received. But those kind of revenue models, I'm assuming from a development standpoint that everything we give up, we gain somewhere else. For example, law enforcement. If we went into a joint law enforcement model, the borough would share that model for all the individual communities, but we would give up that revenue and that service. In terms of school funding, a similar mechanism, but that is more important to us than other services. So this is a question of trying to fit into the big picture, but maintain as much autonomy as you think appropriate for your own community without compromising your identity.
So I guess my point about a borough in general is that we still have a home rule city here. We still offer all of our services that we do, and I don't know if that a borough would necessarily change that. What it would do is give us a regional government, and that's what I would like to see the studies on, to see how feasible that is, because we rely on the sound so much in this community. We're all connected to the sound in some way, and there's no local government out there, it's the state. So if anything's happening in the sound that we need addressed, we have to go to the state. If there is any, I don't know, I just feel like we were very included in the state and we should be included in this process. And the talk about the borough, I don't think is gonna go away. It's been going on for over 60 years since statehood about a borough. So it's, I think, a decision about when is the time to form a borough, not really whether it's the best decision, it's when is the best time. Maybe in 20 years, maybe in 20 or 40 years, maybe now, but we have a different element into a borough now than we haven't looked into in the past. Girdwood is another community that has a sizable population, yes, more than us, but all the other studies have been just about basically us and Valdez. There is Chenega, Valdez, and Whittier, but they're small communities, so the assembly would be made up of mostly Cordova and Valdez. If you add Girdwood to the mix, I feel like that's a little more balanced assembly. It's not one home rule community basically controlling the borough. So I would like to at least look into it. I don't know if now is the right time, how all the economic study turns out, what the cost of everything is, but I think we should be at least part of the conversation and look into the study.
Okay, I have Councilman, is that all, Wayne?
Yeah, that's,
I have Councilman Allison, then Schaefer, then Director.
I think a lot of the discussion and questions can't really be answered, and we've discussed that before some kind of a study starts. That might not get us all the answers, but it gets there. But what I'd like to get back to, I guess, is the study itself and how that relates to Valdez, and Valdez opting out of this stage. And I know there's been some discussion that they might not have a choice of joining a Prince William Sound borough. Makes common sense for, if we're gonna call it something, the Prince William Sound, that Valdez is included. So, and I think I talked with you a little bit about that before, about are there numbers still going to be part of the study? Is when and if we do decide to do a borough, if there was a pool of money to reimburse for some of this, I think that's some of the monies that you're talking about as well.
Yeah.
Give me a little more details about Valdez and how they relate to this.
Okay, sure. Let me start from the beginning. So we put it out to 5 economic firms in the state. We got 3 proposals back. We selected Information Insights, and primarily it was the most thorough of all of the proposals that we got. It was also one of the board members with Information Insights is the former chancellor for the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So we feel like if we have an economic study done by this person, people are gonna take it seriously. And he's just one member on a team of specialists. And so we thought that really brought a lot of clout to the study itself to make sure that the data is like really good and that we can stand on that. Initially it was 59,000 change, 59,000 or so with Valdez. Once we heard that Valdez didn't want to be part of it, we asked Information Insights, okay, now that we're not gonna do Valdez, what's this they reduced it basically by about 5,000, so it's 54,000. And this is something that we did talk about as far as reimbursement. So I believe, if a borough becomes formed, there's a pool of $600,000 to be reimbursed. So this $25,000 fee could potentially be reimbursed back to Cordova for basically like, you know, setting out that as a, you know, figuring out if it works, fee, expense, part of.
Will any of Valdez's economic data be included in this then, or are they completely?
They're out right now, and I think if the LBC forces them to be part of it, then, you know, they'll have to do their own study, which you know, there's no way they're gonna have their own study for $5,000. You know, and I think that's where Whittier is on board, because if you guys were to go out and do this economic study, you know, you get the same prices that we're getting, and then you would bear the whole cost, where we're separating it out amongst the groups, and there is bang for your buck in that, you know. And Girdwood's raising $40,000. And we, you know, we're doing fundraiser on Friday for it, and you know, we've got businesses in Girdwood that are going to contribute towards it, and so it's very, you know, it's grassroots from our perspective.
Councilman
The other thing I just want to add, I want to, this is according, okay, so this is from our newsletter again. According to the state of Alaska Constitution, quote, "The entire state shall be divided into boroughs, organized and unorganized." So you just said, when is it going to be? And the Constitution says it's going to be, right? But the when is the question, right? And my take on that is, if it's going to happen, we want to say and what it's going to look like. And, you know, whether it gets imposed on us by somebody else, I would rather be part of creating what I want to see go forward. And that to me is very exciting, and some of the new and very interesting and idea. I mean, you could take that to what are the most successful boroughs. There's 19 of them in the state, and what do they do? And you know, you just pick the very best stuff to create your new one. And I do see that as an exciting way to move forward. I do not see benefit in replicating what already exists to the T. I think that we need to have something that is different and, you know, honestly gives more opportunity to the younger generations that are coming up here and calling it home.
might look more like a Lake and Peninsula borough where you have disconnected communities that are all organized into one borough on the Alaska Peninsula. Councilman Schaefer.
And talking, or Melina was mentioning some of the benefits to having a more unified regional voice, so politically, you might be able to have more say in what goes on in the sound. And then also with the ferry, what we say might have a little more weight if we're all organized and speaking together. So I just wanted to make that point. But then how do we get a clear, accurate assessment of a Prince William Sound borough if we don't include Valdez at all in numbers? Because I remember from the previous economics, I guess now we have Girdwood and there's all sorts of different things happening now, but in the previous assessments that they did, when Valdez was not included, it just was not economically feasible at all. But again, that didn't include Girdwood, so I just don't know how we get a clear picture without considering them as, you know, part of the equation.
Yeah, I don't know how the state is going to do it. Either they're going to go forward with the petition that we put forward, which would exclude them. If they choose to, you know, force them into it, essentially. I mean, they're going to have to combine our data, which we already have from the financial study, and then, you know, just pull, which is it's gonna be an extra fee for them, which I guess they'll get the burden of that. I mean,
So it would go to Valdez though, and not the borough?
I would think so. That's,
I mean,
It's not very much money we're talking about.
no, that's true.
As far as budgets go, Valdez never see it or notice it with the revenues they have coming
Right.
from across the state.
from what I understand, yeah.
In council, I mean, if you vote to participate in this assessment process, ask for what you want, if you want Valdez included, or you can contact Chugach, Alaska and see if they'll contribute some to include Yakutat, and so we get a comprehensive picture.
And the consultants are really ready for our input. They want to have a meeting where, we've compiled, so you had asked like what things are the potential new pools of money. And this is our RFP, and analyze potential borough revenue base and estimate revenue potential from PILT and other federal payments. I mean, these are things that I don't know about, but payment in lieu of taxes, how much is that? We don't know. State revenue sharing, property tax, sales tax, fishery tax, severance tax, bed tax, and other taxes. Taxation of tax facilities in borough area not being taxed now, borough formation grant, and borough land entitlement. So that's another one that's like big for Whittier, is they don't have land there. And so with the borough, they could be essentially getting land for Whittier.
Oh, I'm waiting, I just wondered what next on the list.
Councilman Gard.
Go ahead.
Okay. Councilman.
I had a couple questions. One was how they came about this $59,000 price tag for everybody, and then Valdez, that component was only a $5,000 add-on. That doesn't, first of all, doesn't make sense. You mentioned a $600,000 amount for reimbursement.
I believe it's in the statute for with the formation of the borough.
Okay. I mean, the biggest turnoffs are another layer of government. There's a lot of people
And I feel you on
in this
that.
room
Absolutely.
included that don't want to have a borough assembly on top of a city council or something like that, and also additional taxes. I mean, we have plenty.
Yeah, and we feel the same, and that's why we've rallied together in Girdwood, right? Because we're paying a lot of taxes. So, and I think, again, because there is no template for a borough, that's a beautiful place to insert your rights and autonomy.
So just to the taxing point, because I heard tax.
Yeah.
I know Councilman Jones loves taxes. Those aren't necessarily new taxes though, because right now, half of the raw fish tax goes to the state of Alaska. If it's out on floating processors, most of it leaves the region. I mean, you got Kenai and Homer and all kinds of communities participating in that. So I know the 10-year average for the state's half of the raw fish tax revenue is $1.1 million a year. That's the 10-year average over the last 10 years, because I did the math. So, and that doesn't include any severance out of the sound. And severance taxes, I think Dutch Harbor and those have those, where like the 6 million pound pullet quota and the 20% groundfish quota that goes to Kodiak, for instance, that's caught on Prince William Sound. You can charge taxes on that. So instead of them paying a tax landing or whatever. So Councilman Burton.
The floating processor component, is that what you're talking about with the $1.1 million figure? So.
Oh, no, that's just what's landed in Cordova.
Okay.
That's just the state's 50% share of Cordova's raw fish tax revenues.
Several years ago, this is probably 4 or 5, or Jim Cash was mayor, we were talking about borough formation for the sole purpose of trying to recapture so much of the fish tax that was leaving Prince William Sound, being taken to Sitka and Ketchikan and Kodiak and Kenai, and actually this would help with Fishland and Whittier also, but trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding from resources that were leaving here. And one of the ideas was an excise tax. I'm not sure that I would want another tax, but it's something to be considered, I guess.
And just the
floating processors being a big part of that also.
It kind of occurred to me as we're having the discussion, the 2 times that I think Cordova has looked at the borough have kind of been the same times when the road discussions get real strong. It's when our economy is very weak, and that's the worst time to be doing a study, because in the early 2000s, when the Reluctant was closed and half of Main Street was boarded up, and our fish revenues were very, very, very low. Right then, oil revenues were super high, and it was just like you know, you're going in a position of weakness. I mean, if you're gonna form a borough when your community is financially underperforming, you don't have it, you're not negotiating from a position of strength. The thing that I guess I like about this particular time is that Cordova's economy, I mean, all in all, really is doing fairly well. I mean, we've had some short-term pain.
And I think from the, also can I mention, from the taxes perspective, from us at GGA, if it means the taxes are gonna go up, all of us are off the table. I mean, we hear you on that and feel you on that. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for taxes that normally default to the state that could be redirected back to our community primarily. But yeah, so if we do the economic study and the numbers don't add up, we're not going to continue to fight for something that doesn't financially make sense.
Councilman Guard and Burton.
Okay, I'm not being a naysayer, even though much as I sound like I want through all of this, but if you look at, you know, boroughs are basically the counties of down south, and you talked about, you know, those counties were formed first and the towns and the cities later. But if you look at those, they're more tightly connected than we are here in the Sound, both through road systems, through the economics of what they're doing. They're, you know, everybody's interest in that little group much more aligned than what we're looking at here. We're looking at Cordova, the strictly a fishing town, a couple small little villages, Valdez, it's very oil centric and very tourism centric, and then Girdwood is very tourism centric. And none of these are bad positions, but they don't necessarily mesh up to where we're all going to be able to get into a harness together and pull in the same direction to make stuff work really well for us. We may have some competing interests here that make us more at loggerheads than friends at times, which isn't the best thing for trying to govern all of us in one lump.
Councilman Burton.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you know, tonight we have to decide on whether or not we're gonna spend the community's money on this, and we're in a weird position of not knowing enough, and the only way to get more information is to pay for it, and I don't think I mean, for me personally, I'm struggling to get there to that threshold where I feel like I've got enough, you know, I can even make a decision on that, so. I don't know if there's something more that's helpful.
And before we even sat down to figure out, and I understand the position, and my heart goes out to you guys, being the whipping boys for the whipping girls of the MLA. But, you know, as far as sending out writing a request for proposal about what we even want to look for borough formation, we weren't in on any of this. And I don't know that makes any difference, but
I believe we did include some people for comments. We provided the request for proposal and asked if anybody had comments or wanted to amend or, but it was not me that did that. But I believe that some members in Cordova were asked for feedback on what we were asking for. But the other thing is that this is still, we're the very beginning stages. So basically any questions that we're asking, information, insights to come back, can be part of this.
Councilman Jones, any comments? I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions or comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry for being late, so I didn't catch your whole presentation, but one comment I did pick up on is how inconvenient it is for you guys to have to do everything twice and get permission in Girdwood and then go get permission in Anchorage, and that's exactly what's going to happen with the borough. You have to get permission in your community and then you have the borough's permission as well. One concern I would have is if the borough office is in Girdwood, because it would be the population, the largest population in the borough, then we would, to do a construction project or I mean, I don't know if a simple building permit would need borough permission or not, but you'd constantly be having to go 2 places, whereas right now we have it pretty good. We just come into City Hall and get permission and go and do our project. So that would be one concern. And then obviously I'm opposed to additional layers of government in Texas. So I don't know if there's anything I don't know if I'd be convinced that it'd be a good idea, because just fundamentally opposed to more government.
Council, we have the school superintendent here, and schools is one of the big things that figures into it. Do you want to yield a few minutes here?
Yes.
Okay. Alex, did you have any thoughts or concerns or questions you could share? And one thing I think we want to look at, Council, is the Lake and Peninsula Borough, I think, is maybe a similar.
You can separate living
Separated communities with a, center somewhere.
Thank you. I had some comments, not as the superintendent, but as a resident of the community, so I'll try to distinguish the two. On page 5 of the GGA document regarding public education, I think there's some great assumptions in just the bulleted items that appear. It says it appears there could be an opportunity to enhance the quality of public education throughout the area schools. That's a great assumption. Oh, and I kind of take it as the quality of schools isn't where we want it, or it's not good at the moment. So maybe that's a pessimistic view. But I just wonder what that statement is based on. And then consolidation of school districts and efficiencies are theoretically possible, but likely controversial. So if the area were to be boroughized, I'm not sure that you would necessarily decrease the administrative personnel in a district, in a borough district. You would still need a superintendent residing somewhere. You would still need a curriculum director somewhere. You would still need a special education director, an assistant superintendent, a finance department. I do a lot of those things myself, just being here locally. So, I think that it really requires deep and careful thought, as you well know, with statements like that. Again, there could be some efficiencies brought forth, but when you start parsing out roles and responsibilities across a great area in the formation of a borough, I think you lose some things as well. I came from a school district to Cordova that was 25,000 square miles, spread across 10 communities. And, we were centralized as far as our administration goes, and there was talk even at one point about having the administration living in Anchorage, for example. But again, I think there are losses that you have. The inability to connect with a community at a moment's notice. I'm very accessible here in the community as the superintendent. If I were a regional superintendent, for example, not that I would want that position, but I would have to travel to Valdez or Whittier or Girdwood or whoever else was included in the borough. So you would have increased costs sort of in the operations of having to travel occasionally to places, probably weekly or at least monthly. So several of the superintendents and I have had real brief conversations just about the idea of boroughizing, and it's more philosophical discussions at the moment, not really kind of in the details of things. So if you have specific questions or think of any, I'm happy to try to respond to them, but those are my thoughts at the moment.
Councilman Gard.
And you may not be able to answer this, but one of my big questions in this has been school funding formula. When we go from a home rule city to a borough, financial responsibilities from the state changing that, I believe,
Councilman Gard, I don't know the details of what that would look like. I would imagine that there is a borough contribution that's required, both a minimum and a maximum, similar to what there would be for local contribution. But I do believe that there would be a required contribution from the borough.
And from the state.
No, I believe the state
Is it at a
mandatory
different level?
contribution
I
levels
don't know how that works.
go
That's
down.
what the study's gonna show.
Right.
Yeah,
That's one of the things the
Yeah.
study said.
and so that can be a plus and a minus. If the state is declining their funding, then maybe there's less stability, but,
This is one of the reasons, I believe one of the reasons the state has been
Pushing it.
pushing stuff is because it takes things, responsibilities or costs, off the state's plate. This being one of them.
Councilman Jones, do you have a question for?
Well, I probably missed this at the beginning, but I guess I'm just curious how you guys came up with the idea to join a Prince William Sound borough when you're not actually in Prince William Sound.
We hired a third-party consultant to do, to give an analysis on separating from the municipality of Anchorage and to maximize self-governance. And her conclusion was that a Prince William Sound borough, and that we become, you know, our own city. Right now, we're not a city of Girdwood. It used to be that way. The people of Girdwood actually voted twice not to be included in Anchorage, and then it went to an area-wide Anchorage vote, and then we got sucked in. So, and that happened in the 70s. So there's, according to our survey, 35% of the population remembers that event. So, yeah, it's a one pathway, you know, there's others. When he was talking about your guys' economic, I don't know what you were reading that from, but in there, I heard a lot of things that resonate with Girdwood. Things like ecotourism. I mean, Girdwood is known as kind of a granola cruncher hippie community, and that is very much in alignment with the kind of development that we'd like to see. So, you know, big industrial stuff scares away our community. But, you know, smaller, you know, working together, community stuff, I mean, Girdwood is great, that kind of stuff. So there are, you know, even though we're not a fishing community, that with the recreation, the tourism, ecotourism, I mean, there are, we find more compatible things with the Prince William Sound than we do with Anchorage, and than we do with the Kenai Peninsula. So once we had this report, we had positive feedback from the LBC. That's why we started moving forward on it.
So we're kind of at the end of our hour, council. I think just to, not to put words in your mouth, but I guess to restate, and I think we also heard this from Leif and Councilman Meyer when they came back from the meeting. It doesn't sound like it's Girdwood's goal to trade a Anchorage layer of government with a borough layer of government. Your real goal is that to have kind of a strong cities, weak borough type form where you have very autonomous communities, and it sounds like that was the goal of pretty much all the communities.
Absolutely, and I think that in forming the community, considering that, I don't know if you missed this part, but there is no template for a borough. So establishing exactly what we want, even if, you know, referencing the autonomy of the city is the very first thing that goes on the charter. Those are the kinds of things that we can sit down as a community and say, what's important to Cordova? What's important to Whittier? What's important to Girdwood? And then, boom, those are the very fundamental foundation part of our charter. And I would like to see that be put together on our terms, not on somebody else's terms.
Okay, and then one last piece I haven't heard discussed is this: the state also provides land to boroughs. When you form a borough, the state gives you land allocation that becomes borough lands for borough development or use. Okay, so we're going to be getting to that agenda item. Crystal, if you want to stick around,
Okay.
You're welcome to. And I will say that it's not uncommon for us to suspend the rules if council wants to ask any additional questions when they come to that decision point. So. Okay, thank you. We will take just a 2-minute recess, and then we'll start the regular meeting.
James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss. Is James on the line? Absent. And Olivia Carroll.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay,
Approve the regular agenda?
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved as submitted. Are there any conflicts of interest the council has to disclose? Seeing none, communications, buy-in petitions from visitors. We don't have any guest speakers scheduled for this evening, so audience comments regarding agenda items. Do we have anybody online? I heard the phone beep earlier.
I guess I'm gonna hang it up then, huh?
Okay,
Or he can text me if he needs to come on.
and just your name and residence for the record, please. And we don't have anybody online, so.
Yeah, so I'm Kristen Carpenter, 507 4th Street. Thanks. I just wanted to come and comment, there were several letters in the packet in the correspondence section about the bear issue. And I just wanted to comment for a few minutes on that. I understand that this is a pretty special situation where we have the bear populations on the increase. We've had some mild winters. I think after the heavy snowfall we had in 2012, we've had some pretty mild winters, so the bear population is on the increase. They have no food, they're coming into town. I don't think any of us have seen a summer like this ever. I mean, I haven't in my 24 years here, so this is pretty different. I think of it as a public policy issue. I hope that people will take into account doing some research and looking at some solutions. You know, there are other communities that have examples like Valdez. They don't allow chickens in city limits. I'm not saying that we have to do that. I'm just saying it would be interesting to see how some other communities handle it. And I also feel like the first approach should be a small investment into some dumpster lid containers and a pretty solid public education campaign about trash and dog food and bird seed and things like that, and making sure all that stuff gets put away. And I know people are concerned about kids playing outside. I know it's a public safety issue, but I feel like let's, do the things first that mean we don't have to go out and shoot every bear we see. I don't think that's a great approach. And we live in a small town. We live in Alaska. We live here because it's almost wilderness, not very far out your front door, and people cherish that. And the bears live here too. So I would like to just see us approach this like a public policy issue. It is a public safety issue. What can we do to minimize the encounters? And then if that, when there are instances where that doesn't work, then you take the more extreme measures. That's, I guess, what I'm asking for. Just to make sure there's as much thought and preventive effort put into it as possible. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other audience comments on agenda items? Okay, seeing none, representative of boards and commissions. Should you just had you stay there, Kristen? CCMC? Cordova Community Medical Center?
Yes. I'm going to try to say a little bit more articulately what I was trying to say last time, which is that stability takes time. I think we are getting there at the Cordova Community Medical Center, and there are a couple things that I think show this. One is we staff 8 nurses on the floor, and 2 years ago, when the current administrator started, all of those positions were travelers, and now we have only 2 travelers, so we're kind of working down. And also they're making some pretty significant changes at Sound Alternatives to try to make sure that there's grant compliance, but at the same time they're continuing that service, because I think everybody values being able to have behavioral health services, including substance abuse and mental health services, right in town. And so they're looking at what can be done through telemedicine, and also just trying to make sure that Sound Alternatives is operating within the purview of the medical center itself, that it's not a separate entity, that there is sufficient oversight and grant management, because that's the potential to get us into trouble. But I think Scott has done a lot of work to try to make sure that we're in compliance and we can still get those grant monies. We are, I think, 4 PERS payments behind. We're working on playing catch up with that, and we are at this point running a deficit. at this point in the year compared to the projected budget balance. But I was also thinking that this year we've had a bunch of one-time expenses. You know, they're not expenses that are gonna keep happening every time, but they're things that have affected our bottom line. So we are transitioning to a new electronic health record system. We had the pharmacy buyout. We've had to do the uninterruptible power supply for the CT scanner. You know, those are all one-time things that hopefully aren't gonna keep happening. And I also learned at our last meeting, we had to, let's see, we are receiving $36,000 in a cost adjustment from Medicare. And however it works, we also have to pay them $11,000. So, but that's a net of 25, and it's way smaller of a swing. We used to have, I don't know if you all remember, but there were times when we would owe Medicare like $85,000 or 110,000, and then they'd turn around and give us 30 back or something like that. So Scott did a mid-year cost report so we could kind of adjust and be ready for that. And so I think those swings are getting smaller. So I feel like we're dialing in a little bit better what our expenses are and what we feel like a so-called normal budget will look like. So we're making strides, but stability takes time. That's
So
what
Kristen, on the PERS, are we behind for payments just within this year? Or are these legacy behind that we carried into the
I
year?
think it's this year.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just the 5%, not the extra that they tacked on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question?
But I think, like I said, you know, he's having to pay other bills, like the transition to the electronic health records and things like that. So I think the thinking is that when we got cut up on some of that stuff, we should have money to make up those other payments.
Councilman Gar?
So you talked the 5% and then the other tacked on it. Are we making the payments on the other tacked on it?
Mm-mm.
So those were, the arrears were still,
Yeah.
so the
It's
first
on the
payment-
balance sheet, right?
First,
I mean, I'm just, yeah,
the first payments we're talking about are for current employees.
right.
So we're now behind on those as well as the others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Which happens from time to time.
I think I remember from earlier this summer you were saying you were having an audit done?
Yes, and
midsummer?
so we expect to have that report by the end of September.
Thank you.
Is it safe to ask about the size of the deficit?
It's about 800,000 at this point. And I think that there's some other grant money that there are other, it's either other grants or other reimbursements that they're waiting to get that just hasn't come in yet, so that number will change, and hopefully it will go down, but I'm not totally sure. And we have, I think in the city's budget was $625,000 for this year, at least 600,000, and I think so far we've requested 500,000 of that, so we haven't gone down everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, council? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
School board.
Real quick, James Luce just asked if we could get that
Oh.
line opened up.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Alex Russin, Superintendent, 209 South Bears, or South 2nd Street. Just concurring, I agree with Kristen's comments a little bit earlier, so 3 bears on South 2nd Street the other night, so fun stuff. We're 2 weeks into school, and I think we...
Sorry.
The conference administrator has joined the conference. There are 1 attendee on the conference call.
We should be good now. I'll just call in.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so 2 weeks into school, we had a great start. The weather even cooperated the first day, which was a Wednesday. And so I think everybody has hit the ground running. We've got some new course offerings this year that are exciting, a little bit of change in our schedule for Wednesday classes. We've got 3 classes that are 100-minute blocks of time in which teachers are kind of teaching some passions outside of their content areas. So we've got net mending, we've got marine biology, we've got sketchbookery, we've got boat cooking and boat and backcountry cooking as some offerings, hiking, snowboarding, and skiing, and the weather will permit. So getting lots of kids outside and engaging them in learning opportunities outside of the building. I'm sure Olivia could speak to some of those if she wishes, but we're excited about some of those opportunities. We're gearing up for volleyball season, so today was the first official day of practice for the volleyball team, and we're getting excited to host the Fast Ferry tournament later this month. Progress on the gym floor is moving quite along. They've got nearly the whole floor in place and are looking at starting to paint in the next couple of days. And I'm told, and we'll guarantee Susan, that the floor will be ready by the Fast Ferry tournament time on the 21st. We did get a little bit more money for the floor from the insurance company. As you may well know, there was asbestos containing materials in the mastic layers of the floor, and we pushed back on the insurance company based on the $9,000 they were originally going to offer us, and ended up getting about $54,000 on that. So that certainly helped address those added costs that we knew could be coming, but didn't necessarily look forward to. So I think with the funds that the city contributed and the initial funds that the city, the school district had in place, that should all be covered at this point in time. So we're looking forward to kicking off the, kind of an opening, inviting the community to the tournament when it happens, and taking advantage of that new floor. Our school board has a self-evaluation and goal-setting session happening this Saturday at the Pioneer Igloo, so it'll be probably most of the day. And again, they've got a tool that they've been using to do that self-evaluation, and will identify some opportunities for growth and improvement as a school board governing function. And then one of the things that we're working on right now is to be identified as a Medicare eligible billing entity. I'm not quite sure of the official title, but we have students who need physical therapy, speech language pathology, occupational therapy, services from a school psychologist, and we're kind of filling out paperwork to become eligible to then bill Medicaid for some of those expenses. So we're looking forward to how that process unfolds, and that will help us to reduce or get reimbursed for some of the expenses that we're putting out through our general funds and through some of our grants. So looking forward to that. That's it for now.
I've been meaning to share something with you. I sat next to a school district superintendent from California, and they have a program, I think I-9, they have a program where China is paying like $20,000 per student per year to locate Chinese students in American schools. Anyway, I got her card and stuff for you. I'll drop out. Right. Apparently they think highly of our education system. They like placing their students over here. It could be quite a windfall for a district. Any questions, council?
Could I add just one more thing? So it's sort of a selfish thing, but it's also a good professional opportunity for me. So 2 years ago, I participated in a national delegation of superintendents that visited Cuba to learn about their school system and kind of their social structure as far as wraparound services for students. And I've been invited to join the group again to go to Ecuador and Galapagos Islands for about 10 days. So there will be about 10 superintendents from around the country that were selected to participate in this delegation, and I was fortunate enough to be one of them. So heading out in a couple of weeks to do that.
Great, congratulations. Yeah. Cuba has a pretty interesting educational model where they train all the doctors and a lot of the nursing staff from much of the Spanish-speaking world. Any questions, council? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Olivia, welcome back. Are you gonna be our rep for this whole year? Okay,
I think it turns over in January, right?
Yeah,
First of the
it
year.
didn't do that last year.
Oh, it didn't.
We'd
We'd love to have you.
yes,
So you're
we would.
graduating.
You have a
Yes.
report for us?
Huh?
Have a report?
Yeah.
Okay.
He kind of stole a little bit of what I was gonna say. So the first cross-country meet was the first week of school. It was the state preview at Bartlett, which is the toughest course to the runners. And our coach was happy with the times we got. Also, we have been very bear aware and our parents have been warned. One person did literally run into a bear, but they were fine. The bear just like went past them and it was all good. But we're continuing to run outside with our guard at all times. Swimming again, I don't know too much about that, but from what I hear, it has been going well, and I believe their first meet is next week. Of course, you'll see a post on Facebook, though, so keep your eyes open. We love sharing stuff our students have been doing. Volleyball began today. More on that as the season progresses. The new gym floor. Okay, so thank you guys so much. We want to thank you for that expensive necessity. We have 3 regional tournaments, volleyball, wrestling, and basketball this year. And this new floor seriously helps us not only as a team, but as a host, represent Cordova well. Lunch is free this year, thanks to the work of our lunch ladies and various staff of the school. Every student benefits from this, and it is an incredibly big burden lifted off many shoulders. As he said, we have advisory and Wednesday schedule classes. So in order to expose the students to more classes and experiences, the school decided last year to follow a 100-minute schedule on Wednesday for elective and exploratory classes, among which include, but are not limited to, commercial fishing, coding, high school STEAM, emergency technician training, yoga and mindful meditation, Japanese, and outdoor skills. Along with these student-chose 100-minute periods, we have a 45-minute advisory period. As a senior, that means we learn how to apply for colleges, ASVAB, and scholarships, and also how to interview for jobs. I'm sure there is much more we will be doing, but I can assure you that the graduates from previous years are very jealous. As of now, I have not been given a clear answer to what the other 6 classes do. Skill building and school strengthening are among the answers I've heard. But again, thank you for all your support in the building of the new gym floor, and we cannot express our gratitude enough.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, council? Hey, thank you, Olivia. And as always, you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't. You have other activities calling, but if it's just for sunshine, you have to stay. So, council, does anyone want to remove any of the individual items off the consent calendar?
5.
Okay. We'll pull that out as a new business item and then move it to, or let's see, that is a resolution.
17A.
The 17A.
Okay, on the rest of the consent calendar then,
Roll call, please.
David Allison,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ken Jones,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
James Weiss. Maybe we lost him. James Burton,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We got you, James, thank you.
The consent calendar.
That's the old mute delay. Okay, approval of minutes. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved as submitted. We don't have any bids to consider. Reports of officers. I have a written mayor's report. Wow, I don't even see my own notes here. So on the bear issue, I just want to mention that I've been approached by several members of the public. I have talked to Charlotte, our Westing, our fish and game biologist. I know that Manager Lanning, I wasn't able to sit in on the meeting with the enforcement and city manager, but I think Ellen will have some things to share. I guess just for my own part, living in a very bear-rich area of the community out on the Eyak River, I've had bear encounters, almost bears on my property most years. And I think there is a shared responsibility between individuals, landowners, and maybe the community at large. But it definitely helps to keep your trash indoors, to not throw your fish carcasses and stuff where they're accessible, and take some preventative measures on your part. And I have had bears in and out of my yard this year, but I've kept my dogs inside of kennels, and I have yet to have a bear encounter, even though they're in the neighborhood frequently, and this year in particular. So I just mentioned that. And however, I have read some of the other ordinances in other communities. There are things we can do on the community side too to help, and I think Manager Lanning will share some of the thoughts there. The sidewalks, I just want to thank our planner and assistant planner for putting the time and effort into getting that grant, and thank council for taking that big step when our funds were really tight to put up that 25% match and get that 3/4 match from the state. And it's great to see those new sidewalks going in what is a very, very heavily trafficked part of town between First Street and the elementary school. And it's great to see the improvements that business has made there, and it's really cleans up that part of town and the storm drainage system and whatnot there. So thank you, council, for that. Peter Lane, I think I'll touch on that. I did, there's a handout here, the letter that I wrote to the commissioner regarding the Prince William Sound 2016 salmon declaration. Councilman Jones had asked about a potential for a red salmon declaration for this year. I will say I contacted Representative Stutes, and she said that is under discussion. There are several communities. I think the governor, when he was here this weekend, said Chick Nick's total commercial catch was 132 fish. And Bristol Bay, just next door, had the 3rd largest on record. So we're seeing some really interesting dynamics, and I tried to capture a little of that in this letter. But the other concern I've heard pretty pervasively throughout the community is concern about the Seine Fleet Manager not being in Cordova. And my intention, if there's no objection from council, is to follow with another letter regarding our displeasure with that. And I will say it was a topic of discussion with the governor and Commissioner Cotton, and Representative Stutes was advocating very strongly for us on that front. So the harbor, I just want to mention that I've had the opportunity now it's been offered to council as well to visit our Baylor site, see what the actual physical problems are there and some of the potential solutions, to visit our landfill and see how that's being managed, and see the DEC inspector and hear her comments on how we manage our landfill, which were very positive. Had an opportunity to see the city shop and how that's being maintained, and then this last week, partly because of some complaints I've been getting from the citizens about us not maintaining our harbor and so forth, and I know that council budgeted money for maintenance out there. Well, the thing about the South Harbor is it's very big. There's a lot of floats there, and the absolutely worst condition floats are way out on the end of J float. Those fingers we were losing them, and so that's where the effort's been. So you'll see where some of the fingers that have broken off and things have happened on the larger floats, GH and I. They've made emergency repairs to those, and that's pretty much in keeping, I think, with the plan that we know that we can't rebuild those things. They're just not that kind of floats. But the ones we can rebuild, 20 of those fingers now have been rebuilt, and they look great. I would encourage council, and especially the Harbor Commission, if you get a chance, there has been significant maintenance down in the harbor. So I just kind of wanted to dispel that and provide that feedback back to the citizens. So I think sometimes there's, without seeing it for yourself, like the road repairs that you can see happening right in front of you, the road maintenance. But I'm pretty proud of what's being accomplished, and the pretty dramatic improvement in the way some of those operations have been handled. Yeah, Councilman Kern.
I applaud all the efforts that the Harbor Department is putting into down there and all the work they're doing to do it. We can't expect them to get us back to any kind of snuff. I mean, if we talk about the amount of slips we've got down there, at the rate we're going, it's going to take 10 years to work our way through these just to do the repairs, to kind of try to get the Band-Aids on.
There's 500 fingers and they did 20 this year. And that's just, basically they're stopping now because their budget's done and they've got 4 employees. They advertised all summer, tried to get laborers, and they just had a hard time getting physical manpower. So I feel like they've done what they can. But anyway, I didn't want it to beat it to death, but I think sometimes it's easy to be critical from here without actually seeing the work that's being done. I think it's important. But when you talk about, you know, when the manager talks about having a bare bones budget and not funding maintenance and so forth, that's where it shows up, although that's an enterprise fund, so. That's basically what I just wanted to add verbally. Is there any questions or comments or suggestions on my report?
Did this get sent today, or is this going to be sent?
I have not sent it yet. I will file it online, and the new deadline I should mention is the 18th. It's 5 p.m. on the 18th, and that is posted on, I saw them make the change today. What's that?
Comment?
Yeah, to comment. So they extended that, and actually, I think that was, a lot of that was a Representative Stute's suggestion, because a lot of the fleet was still out fishing, and just had not had time. So that gives fishermen a chance to review, and they're one of the bigger stakeholder groups. So I will get this posted online by tomorrow.
And the draft plan is right in the packet. I
Yeah.
attached it to your report. So
Yeah, and
that's what
this
can be
responds
commented
to.
on by
Yes.
September
18th.
8th.
Yeah. Okay, manager's report.
Don't you just love the look of new concrete
I like the smell.
on Adams Street? The guy out there at the brush is a master at making it look good. It's so pretty when you look up that road, and on the 12th, scheduled for paving along with Main Street and a couple of other places, small places, one behind Nichols, that we'd scheduled. So we've tried to, while we haven't really budgeted for some of this paving, we've tried to stick it in. You know, when we did our fishing game corner, asphalt was $1,000 a ton. And so it was expensive, and we're kind of at the mercy of that. So we're trying to combine that with other efforts to keep the cost down. And so we had some funds through CEC and other entities that we had collected for paving, and we chose to do those critical pieces. But we'll do a pretty large saw cut on Main Street and lay down new asphalt, so I think it'll look really good, and that should all be done on the 12th. And then, as you know, we had a water line break there. There's a line that feeds to the telephone company there, and right where the tap was, it cracked virtually all the way around the pipe. And that had created some of the drainage issues behind our building here and so forth. So all of those things are cleared up with the repair of that line. The guys did a great job in working on that. I think the floor is 90% done, is what Rich wrote to me today, so we're pretty close on the floor. Looks pretty good. Budget, I'll have my first draft to you, scheduled to have our first budget conversation on the 19th, is my plan. I've taken the liberty to include the SRS funds in this budget. I think you'll like the way it looks. We had talked about not using that, but I think it's gonna work for us. Bill grant contract is signed, the comp plan is coming. Did I answer you? You had a question about the ambulance fund. Did I answer that question for you?
I think it was we are billing and we are collecting, and there's in that fund, but
There's Systems Design West is the one that does the billing and the collecting, and there's 380,000 plus or minus in 2 different funds. I couldn't remember if I sent that.
and you're working on that list of what money is allocated and unallocated, or unaccounted or not unaccounted for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You said you understood,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
how much is in the harbor fund, and where is it at? Was it in the permanent fund or the
Yeah.
general fund? how much is in the landfill closing?
Yeah, we'll do all that during the first budget and get that all taken care of. The bears. We've had a couple of meetings with Charlotte and staff concerning the bears, and as you know, we've shut down the fish cleaning station. That was removed early this morning. We met again yesterday to talk about relocating that fish cleaning station farther up, and there might be the potential of some school resource funds through the Forest Service available for some of that project, so Kathy's going to be pursuing those. We're working on installing some bear-proof lids in different places, select places where there's problems. We're working on a process by which we can, bear-proof, and this is ultimately your decision, that you could require bear-proof containers throughout the town. Everybody just have to buy one, but I don't know that that's the answer. So we're working on some of those possibilities as well. We've talked about an ordinance, a couple of ordinances that on trash collection times and putting out trash, and perhaps electric fences around chicken coops. We'll look at those and see if those have any value for you. And we're trying to encourage people to be responsible with their trash, and we are monitoring some of the trash routes to see if there's continuing problems in particular places and increase enforcement. So I think we're trying to do whatever we can and chase a lot of bears. We've had, let's see, last year we had 3, 4 bear calls. We've had 54 this year. So that I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Jones?
Has there been any looking into what the cost would be if we were to bring down a container full of bear-proof trash cans and sell them and tack them onto people's bills or something like that? Is that a program we could?
Yeah, we know that cost.
Yeah.
We know that cost per container.
Is that something you guys are thinking about looking into?
I think if you look back in that one memo I distributed, I think the cost might have been in there, but I'll look at it and get something out to you tomorrow.
Okay.
I think we have that easily available. I just don't have it with me.
And then, do you know off the top of your head, probably not, but the cost of retrofitting all the dumpsters in town with the heavier bear-proof lids?
I don't know the cost of that.
Seemed like it was north of 100,000.
Yeah, it was like 120 or something.
These did a ton for like over 200 for, I thought it was about 100,000.
Again,
I don't know how many dumpsters we have in town though.
Couple hundred.
500, more than 500.
More than 500.
So
Sucks.
it's pretty expensive. It's in the neighborhood of $400 or $500 a container. Plus, that creates dumping issues, collecting issues. It's not just a matter of one guy picking it up and taking it to the truck anymore. It requires specialized dumping equipment. So there's a lot to think through. And as we talk through the budget this year, I said I was going to offer that we as the general fund not increase any revenue to us, but the enterprise funds at 5%. And I suggested that early on for 5 years to catch up, or to get stabilized.
So maybe $400 to $500 per dumpster, but we don't have 400 or 500 dumpsters.
I don't know right off the top of my head how many. Oh, the big dumpsters, I have those numbers as well. The 4-yarders are 2,400 a piece, and the bigger ones are closer to 4,000. 8 yards are 4,000, something like that.
For new ones?
New ones.
With the bear-proof lids?
Correct. And we're looking at retrofitting those ourselves. We've
$500 each.
launched a little contest to have somebody design some stuff and work on some stuff at our shop, so, in addition to lids.
We talked last time about, when we were talking about appropriate dollars for a new trash truck, you were gonna look into actuals instead of projecteds for cost to not pay. When you get a chance to work on that at all yet? Or?
I just got some of those numbers today, actually, and I know that from a handling standpoint, there's no difference because we're still, personnel standpoint, we're still, 5 guys, 40 hours a week. So we're working on the mileage numbers and so forth for you. But we're not bailing. The conveyor's gone. The conveyor was dismantled. And we're still using the baler to recycle, but the conveyor was completely done, shot, gone.
Oh, I thought it was just a belt.
The conveyor's done. The belt's $250,000.
I know, that's what we were talking about replacing.
So it's all been dismantled. It was all rusty. It was a wreck. The whole thing, even to put a new belt on it, you had to put in a whole new structure. So, and we have another landfill inspection coming.
Yes, they're working out the schedule for October with a new person.
We're gonna have our second tour of the trash.
So now, because when we started down this road of not paving, we were just minus a belt. But now we're minus a belt and the structure under the belt. So we're 250K for a belt. So if we decide we want to go back to paving, where are we at for the total cost to get back to where we were if we decide we want to go back?
I don't know that number with the structure that goes with it, but the structure would have to be replaced anyway with
I'm not arguing that.
all of it, all the rollers, everything.
That's fine, I'm not arguing any of that.
I don't know, you're probably $400,000 or $500,000
For the structure?
for everything,
Okay.
Yeah,
And how much is a new truck?
269.
How long does it last?
Well, our truck is 20 plus years.
Now, the point, how many of those were making all the dump runs and how many of them were just driving around town?
Well, I know the cost is a shock, but I can only tell you that having your own landfill and collection services is expensive.
Yes.
There's no way around it. It's like your water system and everything else. And, I can't deal with what happened before I got here, but I'm trying to make sure that all of those funds are solvent and collecting enough revenue to address depreciation and replacement of equipment. As an example, the harbor would require $1 million a year extra in fees to replace it every 30 years. And that's a tough thing to think about. So
The shocking thing is you look at the harbor the pilings, the ramps and everything, we've got $70 to $80 million of infrastructure there. So if you look at a 50-year replacement, that's $1.5 million a year at a high level,
So that's what we've tried to work through, and those are the decisions you guys get to make and tell me where you want to go.
Those aren't administrative.
It's no O&M. It's no O&M.
Yeah, if your trash is, your refuse fee is $40 a month, 25% over 5 years, it's gonna go up $10. You're gonna be paying $50. But that $50 makes a lot of difference on the number of accounts that are there so that you can collect some funds to put away. The refuse fund only has $100,000 available, and that's why we recommended taking it out of the reserves so that you can maintain some of that if something else happens. And there's no easy solution to any of this. It's all tough dollars. But I think the general fund is stable. I'm pretty happy with it this year. Right? I think it's going to be a little more fun this year.
Is this a report? Getting
questions?
carried away.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I was cognizant of that. Okay, any other questions, council? Okay. Clerk's report.
I'm just gonna say this out loud, which will help with the advertising. A couple of the commissioners on Parks and Rec are interested in getting the Trails Committee going again, and I believe we need 2 members, so we're kind of soliciting citizens who are interested, and they can write a letter and send it to me, to the attention, or for, a letter to the mayor or an email to the mayor, and I'll try and get those appointed at the next meeting.
Did you receive a letter of interest for Parks and Rec? I'm sorry, for planning and zoning?
No, I did not.
This week? Okay,
No.
I'll follow up.
Okay. And one other thing, Mr. Russin just corrected something in my packet, that I had an email address on a school board member wrong, but I put all the boards and commissions in this packet, and there was a time when we had phone numbers on everything, but I've just gone to emails only. However, our website has phone numbers for some council members. So why don't you look at the website and see what's there? Some of you have home numbers, some have cells. I just changed the mayor's. He asked me to change it to his cell because his home phone doesn't get looked at like mine. So you guys can let me know. Keep it how they are, add a number. If you feel as though you've heard from anybody who said that you were hard to get a hold of, I can change up how we put that out there for people. And one other thing, I'm still waiting on the clerk's deed, which would give the city possession of the Cordova house. And that's the next step. There was some other paperwork and affidavits that we had to file first, and the attorney is going to get that recorded here shortly. And then the next step will be council passing an ordinance to say that it has a public purpose and keep it, or declare that it does not have a public purpose and authorize it to put it up for sale. So those will be some decisions coming forward. And that's all I have.
So Susan, when seats on committees and commissions and boards and commissions are approaching or expiration, do we reach out to them to see if they're interested in renewing, or we just kind of?
So November is the turnover for all of them. We coordinated that here a few years ago so that it's all at the same time. So I'll get ready to start advertising, and I will get in touch with each staff member on each board and commission, and they will bring it up to their whole board and commission the same way that the public learns of it. So a seated member does not have any distinct advantage over somebody else in the public interested in getting on that.
And then we have a big turnover this year, mayor and 3 council seats, so that's half of us. And when is the declaration of candidacy open?
Not until January. Could you quit rushing me? I got time.
Okay, great.
But in January, I think the very last week of December, I'll start advertising for the March election, March 19th.
Okay. And those vacancies are highlighted in your packets. All right, thank you. Any questions?
I forgot.
Like that, Grant. Manager Lanning.
Most important thing, in a little sad note, Rich Rogers resigned today. His last day will be October 5th, and I just wanted to put that forward to you. So he's just on to pursue, as he said, the next chapter in his life, whatever that is. So just wanted to let you know that, and when we talked about reorganization, that'll be part of the budget discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Correspondence is included in the packet. Then ordinances and resolutions. First item 16 is resolution 08-18-19, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending the 2018 budget by appropriating $20,000 from the City of Cordova General Fund Reserve and transferring it into the number 401 fund in order to contribute funds for an economic analysis of a Prince William Sound borough.
approve resolution 08-18-19.
Second?
A motion and a second, discussion? Councilman Schaefer?
I think we had a lot of really good discussion earlier. I'm more moving it to get it on the table, but I'm sort of the mind of, Councilman Burton said that kind of the problem that we're in is that we don't know enough to really make the decision not to, or to, you know, we don't have a lot of information, so it's hard to make a decision yes or no. But I think this economic feasibility study will help get us that information to let us know if we want to continue on at the next step. I think it'd be valuable. There's value in having a seat at the table and being part of the process.
Councilman Burton?
Just a clerical comment. I guess it says 20,000 in the resolution on the title here, and then in the actual meat, I think it specifies 25,000. So I want to know which it is.
Yeah, there's a.
So it needs to be amended on somewhere.
Only because it had been before council once with that number, so I kept it the same.
So just a sec, what was your motion, Councilman Schaefer?
Oh, I just moved to approve how it's written in the resolution.
Okay,
Is what I've
so the
done.
motion is $20,000.
And I think Burton made a motion to amend, and I'll second that.
Okay,
Okay.
have a motion and a second to amend.
It wasn't really a motion to amend. I wanted clarification on which it was.
Okay, so there's not a motion.
I move to amend to 25,000.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to amend to $25,000.
It already says 25,000 in the resolution.
In the resolution, does it?
No, my resolution doesn't.
No.
No, it says 20.
Well, we're there. The motion was for 20, so that's why they amended it.
Motion's for 20. The staff memo says 25. The resolution says 20. And then the memo from staff, again, says 25. So, I mean, it's just not consistent throughout the.
Well, but it says.
So,
The reason I made the motion was to clarify.
yeah, so we're there. We're at $25,000 as amended. So would anyone like to speak to the amended motion?
Question.
Okay, so for the motion
Just for the
amended to $25,000, does this have to be a roll call?
There's one on the line, I could, yeah.
Roll call, please.
So to amend to 25. Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
James Weiss. Is he on the line? Ken Jones,
No.
David Allison,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
James Burton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So motion, the amended motion carries. So discussion on the main motion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
So on the main motion as amended to 25. Ken Jones,
No.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
James Weiss is absent, Melina Meyer,
Yes.
James Burton,
No.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
David Allison.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-2.
Okay, the next item of business is Resolution 09-18-22, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, designating capital improvement projects. There's a list on page 52. And do we do this quarterly, Susan, generally?
Yes,
So there'd be one more bite at this, I guess, before the legislative agenda starts.
yes. I guess it's usually December after this.
Councilman Allison?
Just a comment, I guess. We've looked at the list for some time, and I think this pretty much lines up with what we've got. It doesn't match up at all with our planning commission's resolution, which is later on our agenda, but I think some of those things can be dealt with, but I think maybe our idea of a capital improvement project is different than our planning commission's idea of capital projects, and that, I don't know that they have to line up at all, but if you compare them, they are quite different. But I don't have a problem with ours. I think some of theirs can be dealt with on a community basis rather than necessarily a state capital projects list. This is more the state and federal funding list.
Yeah.
Well, their biggest ticket item on here is North Harbor sidewalks, and that's right there, 1D on our priority list. Somewhat in line, but
Mr. Mayor, can I speak to that?
City Clerk.
I think that they're tasked with doing something a little different. Theirs is more of an internal, handle it within budgets kind of thing, whereas ours is more legislative and meant for state and federal funding.
That's how it's approached.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then school repairs, I guess just for a refresher, have some of those been addressed now? Some or all of them? I think I don't, if these were like HVAC system, windows, gym floor, I think a lot of those have actually been addressed, so.
Don't we still need a boiler?
That's the one I'm thinking of, the boiler. Okay.
High school, yeah, the HVAC system.
Okay.
Not the high school.
I can't imagine that there aren't capital items there, so. That might be just a good thing if you have a capital list to get that over to council, so.
We have to put it on page 19 in our budget, facility maintenance.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like there's any.
Mr. Mayor, I would propose that we add a number 7, just road improvement / sidewalks. You know, maybe there's a pot of money down in Juneau that if we have it on our list, that would help. I mean, it's just a list, so. If the planning commission wants, it seems like their priority is ADA sidewalks and road improvements, we might be able to have it on our list.
I'll second that.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking out loud as we were talking about the borough, and I thought, there's a CAPSIS program. Last year, we were basically told don't submit to that, but that's something that there's a deadline on. It's basically the capital improvement system, and Bitney's all over this, but generally we do that every year. We take some of these and we put capital requests into that system so that when the session comes, they have those, our legislators have them on their list in front of them, so. But I was thinking about the potential for borough formation. I don't know if that's one you want on this list, but we would certainly want to think about these, so, okay. Any other additions or thoughts?
Can you tell me exactly how to word it if you were gonna, that amendment?
Yeah, I guess it would just be number 7, and it'd be sidewalks / or road improvements / ADA sidewalk improvements. Or ADA accessible sidewalks, whichever.
Okay.
Your rate's better.
I wonder if, I'm just thinking about the Trails Committee and some trails funding and the bike trails. Roads, trails, and sidewalks. But
I don't know, they might suggest something to you after they meet.
right,
I guess I just have a question about this in general, because it's about the same as January. So do we do this in January and September of every year?
Quarterly. I
Okay.
try to look at quarterly.
they go in the packet every quarter. They aren't often adjusted. It's one you definitely want to take a hard look at right before the legislative session and make sure that you have everything in there and that they're prioritized the way you want. Because this is what me and Bitney and any of us will be shopping in Juneau when we're down there, so, and federally.
I guess, I don't know, maybe it should be higher than number 7, maybe it should be under hospital upgrades or, I'll leave that up to the rest of council. I mean, if our planning commission is putting this resolution forward to us, it's obviously important to them, so.
And why don't we just leave it in as number 7 for right now? Where this list is gonna do us some good, it's right before it's time to send it off to the legislature. instead of just doing an either, trying to figure out from quick to second thing to.
So,
From them, but it puts it on the event horizon, so when we do it, we can give a little bit of thought next time.
and because this is a resolution, maybe I should formalize this. So there's a motion to include roads and sidewalk, ADA sidewalk improvements as item 7. Is there a second on that?
It was, yeah.
Okay, so that's an amendment. Okay, are there any further amendments since this is a list? Okay, any discussion on that amendment? Sounds like there was just some, so. Okay, all in favor on the amended motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. So any discussion on the whole list now? Main motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's approved as amended. Okay, item 17A was on the consent agenda. As item 5, the contract with the appraisal company. Councilman Allison, did you want to make a motion or?
Yeah, I'll move resolution 09/18/21, approving the 2019 assessor contract.
Have a motion and a second. Discussion, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I guess the reason I pulled this was because in the fiscal impacts, it had $20,000 to be entered in the 2018 line item for assessor fees. Is that correct, or should that be the 2019 line item when we do our budget?
I don't know, where is it? What was
The
that?
fiscal impacts on page 1.
Item 3.
It's just, this is for the 2019 contract. I recognize that we're signing this contract in 2018, but
I was under the impression it was for the 19 assessment year, because we're already done with 18.
it is, and it won't be done until the 19, and it won't be spent until 19. I just wondering if it's in the 19 budget or is it in the 18?
It's in the 19 budget.
Okay, your fiscal impact say 2018 budget. So I just wanted to clarify that.
In my memo, or
On
is
page
it in the
one.
body of the?
In the
In the body, yeah.
body, under fiscal impacts, item 3.
Page 1?
Council
packet.
page 1.
Page after the yellow page.
Okay,
Yeah. Item 3. fiscal
19,
impacts. Okay.
got it.
So I'll call that a clerical correction. Further discussion? Councilman Jones.
I guess I just have a question. It's sitting here that it's, required by code. I was wondering if you could email me the code containing that. And I just, I don't see why we have to do it every single year, but.
I was looking at it today, it's in charter and code, just the department, or, that we have an assessor. And then, go ahead, Alan, you want?
I asked the state assessor that very question today, Mr. McGee, said, is there any downside to us doing this every other year? I think part of the explanation is that it's not required each and every year, but what you're trying to guard against is any challenges or inaccuracies to the assessment roll. And Susan, you can help me, but I think what we do here is we sort of roll through this every other year. We don't assess every property in year 1, and then in year 2, we catch some of the properties that we didn't assess in 1 and keep everything refreshed and up to date and clean. And that's kind of rather than a more complete community-wide assessment every 2 years, because you don't really want to go longer than 2 years, not only to protect yourself from an assessed value standpoint, but the taxation on that. So I'd offer that we're kind of rolling in at under 20 or at 20 every year, but it would be 40 if you did it every other year. And I think we have more accuracy, because what you don't want to do is get audited. And he said in his email that we've never been audited.
Yeah,
but we're due, so I don't know what that means, but I think that's his explanation, and I'd be happy to send you his email tomorrow to council to take a look at what his response was to me.
So council, actually, when I asked for conflicts of interest, I should have declared one myself. My wife works for the appraisal company of Alaska. So I'm actually gonna just hand the gavel to Councilman Allison here and let him, so I'm not participating in the discussion or chairing of this item.
Did we already vote on it anyway?
No.
We did not.
Call for the question.
You're in discussion.
Any other discussion?
One question.
Yes, sir.
We're looking at what, a 12% cost increase over the last year's cost. Any explanations for where the, how often do we have?
I don't.
It's been up and down depending on what he thinks he's going to do. I think what he said, I mean, it's been 17, 20, 18,
Okay, so
22.
it's not a many year.
It hasn't been, I don't think so.
It was 20 and 18 as well.
Oh, it wasn't 18?
The last one was
18.
18 in 2017,
Yeah, 20 and 2018.
and then
Okay,
And then 20 now in 2019.
okay.
So it stayed the same from.
Never back to my ignorant question.
Further discussion? Hearing none, do we need to roll call?
No.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries 5-1.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Allison. Unfinished business, we have none on the agenda. New and miscellaneous business, Planning Commission resolution regarding recommended capital improvements is an informational item. As Councilman Allison mentioned, was on page 55. Pending agenda calendar and elected and appointed officials list. I'm gonna, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I just have one question on the planning commissions thing.
Yeah.
And I think this has been asked before, but I'm not sure we got a solid answer on it yet. But on the addressing, can the 911 funds that we should still have in an account cover addressing? Will they? So that could be addressed with funds that we already have available.
65,000, 64,000 in that account. And we've talked about that before, using that money for the process. I think the reluctance was that it won't complete the job, so we're gonna have to implement the 911 surtax again. So I think we've been reluctant to propose that.
My opinion, from somebody who's been on council and discussed this for 20-some years, is that we need to start at some point then.
I agree.
We need to, if addressing is what we need to do first, then let's get her going. And I don't think anybody in town will have a problem paying a surcharge if they can see it going somewhere for some good. They don't want to pay just to, build up some imaginary fund at the city, but I think if they see that going towards a bona fide system. Now, the whole 911 system is, the state is looking at some different options there too, and perhaps a statewide deal as well. So that whole thing's kind of in flux, but we've got an addressing problem in Cordova that needs to be.
And I think our proposal was a couple years old, and so we obviously need to update that. I don't even think that person's available anymore to help with that system, so.
I have another question about addressing. If we did the system, is there some kind of database? Because I know sometimes when you put your address in somewhere, it's like, that's not a real address. And then you put it somewhere else and it's like, oh, that's a real address. Do we know kind of the background about
Well, you mean in terms of a physical location?
Yeah, and not just for getting mail or getting something shipped here, but even when you're filling out account informations and billing with other services.
Well, unless Sam has something she'd like to add, I think the concept of the addressing is to create each physical location. If you own 3 lots in a row, each one of those lots has an address, physical address. You may live in one, but each legal lot is parceled out and cataloged in the system so that there's a physical location identified with it.
So does our system, or would our system link up with?
Well, the idea is that everything links up so that when you give a physical address, it is interpreted on a map and a location that everybody knows that regardless if your ambulance driver has been there 25 years and knows John Brown's house on 3rd Avenue and could find it that way, your rookie that just came to town by that physical address could find that same property. That's the idea.
And your electric co-op and your telephone co-op and Google Maps and
sharing databases, keeping it all up to date, takes a little bit of effort. That answer your question?
Yeah, it was kind of a broad question.
so pending agenda, I will not be able to make the October 17th meeting. In the October 3rd meeting, I'm not sure. I think I get back to Cordova that day, so. Any other pending agenda items?
Yes.
Councilman Prince?
We have a date already, yes? September 20th, that the kickoff for the borough feasibility study, is that right? Did we check with the Cordova Center and we have a room, or we didn't go that far?
No, for sure.
Well, I know, but the way you handed this to me made me think you guys were out in the audience doing work. So more information will follow, but they want to come, Information Insights, who is the company that got the bid, is going to come to Cordova for the kickoff meeting, September 20th, on that borough economic study. Yes?
Can they video stuff that happens in the Master Theater? Just so then people who are in town can see it.
Yeah, all location and everything is gonna be pending, but they just, we're hoping that's the case.
So, sure, Crystal.
So that would be the perfect time for council, if you have specific questions, you know, that's when those should be asked to those consultants. So, you know, anything that you really think should be drilled down specifically for Cordova, start making a list of those and then put it together for the 20th.
Yeah, and I think, Crystal, I think from the council discussion tonight, I think there's certainly interest in Valdez, you know, based on this contribution. I don't know if that can be revisited, but those economics probably be pretty important, so. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to maybe, I don't know, move this resolution of support for PISWAC. Could really use this for the next meeting. So we make sure that happens, because if you're going to be gone and need to get it on the books so we can get it submitted for that mid-October meeting, Board of Fish meeting. Also, would like to add on here, I think we need to look at our nuisance laws regarding how we handle trash and our policy in wake of the bear apocalypse.
Okay. Councilman Garden.
The letter of support for BISWAC, do we want to make that only BISWAC specific or the FDA?
Both, I would say.
Who's rating it?
And
I don't know if I know exactly, if people want to send me some information or on exactly what to include. we have the VFDA one, I mean, but that's pretty tailored to VFDA.
Maybe we can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. The Fisheries Advisory Committee, frankly, I don't think we've convened a single meeting since I've been mayor. And I think it's important to kickstart that, especially with the Salmon Harvest Task Force coming up. We've got a Board of Fish cycle will be coming. This letter of support. I circulated that op-ed to, I think I copied that to council on the hatcheries. You probably pull some whereases right out of that, but maybe I could task the Fisheries Advisory Committee with coming up with that. And I think Casey did indicate that he was willing to sit in as the FISWAC chair, so. Okay.
I guess one other thing is, now we've discussed a 2018 Copper River Sockeye disaster declaration request. We want to have that on a future meeting just to get the ball rolling. I know Louis Stutes and the governor both said it's on their radar, but I think a formal request from the city of Cordova might go a long ways. I mean, it's the worst season in 50 years for the Copper River District, so.
If, I'd be glad to write the letter if I can get the data somewhere of what the catch is. I think that the tipping point is it has to be less than 25%. I didn't read through those NOAA criteria, but it has to be like less than 25% historical average. I think 5 out of 40 or whatever openers should get us there, so.
I think, yeah.
We're like 30,000 fish or something.
36,000 sockeye and 7,000 king.
Okay.
The normal is 20,000 and a million.
Okay.
I was taking those notes the other day, I couldn't believe it.
I'll, again, if I can get those numbers somewhere, I'd be glad to get a letter out. So I'll just take that on, I guess. Fish and Game should have them, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to circle
Councilman
back
Schaefer.
with something to what Councilman Jones had said about, seeing something on the agenda about attractants and how we handle refuse in town, and then also other attractants like livestock and what our regulations are there. So.
But what do we want exactly? We're putting it on pending agenda for maybe a future work session, or are we doing more than
I
that?
would say a nuisance law review, maybe a workshop so community members can come in and.
Council, I'm gonna make a suggestion based on experience, because I've seen this come and go and come and go and come and go. The manager and staff are working on this, and they're working directly with the enforcement and Fish and Game and stuff. What I've seen is, especially on anomalies, like we had the one that really jumps to mind is a trapping ordinance. So a couple of animals get caught in a trap, and I'm not kidding you, we will have 3 or 4 council meetings, several work sessions. We redrafted the trapping ordinance, and at the end of the day, did we ever change it?
No, then it became an initiative petition.
Yeah, then it became an initiative petition, and nothing was ever done. And
Passed, I thought.
it passed. Okay, yeah, that's right. The initiative petition passed. So that's where it went. So I know the public's very sensitive to this right now, but it is kind of an anomalous year, and I think it's. I would just suggest that city staff is working on it, and they have some suggestions. And I would just question if you really want to wade into this. Because I think the trapping thing came up 2 or 3 times over a 20-year span, and every time it literally sucked the life out of council for the entire winter. That's just
Committees and so on.
And so there's a time maybe when council should try to, or might want to focus on, your capital improvements list, the harbor and stuff. It's just a suggestion. So.
Would it be appropriate?
Councilman Allison, yeah.
Well, I guess from my personal perspective, my intent was during the budget time, looking at the refuse budget, was to certainly consider some of these options that might cost some money, but belong appropriately in the refuse budget.
So you've requested it on there, so I just, do you want to do that, or you want to kind of wait for staff feedback?
We can wait for staff to bring it up.
Okay.
I just mainly want to, have it on an agenda so the community sees we're actually doing something about all their complaints.
Absolutely. I know the council's really taken
responsive, so.
Get a lot of feedback.
More to bear issue than just limiting garbage, because, they're looking for territory, and it's a comfortable territory to be in. They're gonna move into it if we can make it uncomfortable for them to be there.
Yeah. And I think with the public testimony and the managers today, I think there's a kind of a comprehensive plan for things citizens can do, you know, an awareness campaign, and then some actual things that you can do as council to improve the situation, so. It's certainly appropriate response, so.
So, only because I write it here to say that it needs to be very clear for staff, so you are going to ask Facilities Advisory Committee to meet to draft a resolution, so you're gonna give them a time frame. Do you think first October meeting would be timely enough? When is the Board of Fish?
It's October 17th, 19th. Yeah.
I believe the comments are due October 3rd.
Yeah.
Oh, then it has to be at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Good.
I don't know that they have time to meet.
Let's get it done.
I mean, maybe, if you,
Okay, yeah, we'll just get one drafted.
okay. And I'm grabbing whereases from your article in the paper has some probably, right? And, all right, I'll work on it.
And if you need help, I'm available. Casey said at Piswak said he was available.
Yeah. I see
Tommy,
Tommy
are
nodding.
you available?
Tommy looks pissed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Wife may take issue with that.
And then I do plan on getting that letter to the department out this week on the same manager. And just fishing games and staff in general being taken out of the community. The shellfish biologist was another one where, you know. Okay. Councilman Meyer.
I don't know if this should go under future agenda, but maybe we should think about having a borough group together. I know that it's gonna be kicking off here soon, and I don't know if it should all land on us, or if we wanna have a committee to look over that data and to be in communications with the study so we can get exactly what information we want on there and look at the past.
You thinking like an ad hoc committee? I know there's some people in the business community that express some interest
And some people that have been part of the past committee have said that they would be happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. We could form an ad hoc committee that's just in place while we're looking at the borough, and then it's dissolved afterwards.
Okay.
Is that council's wish, or do we want to wait until after the presentation? Okay, well, we'll put it on the agenda for discussion, I guess. Well,
it's gonna be coming up
Gonna
here.
open it.
The September 20th kickoff is the day after our next meeting, so maybe we'll see how that kickoff goes, and we'll do it at the one after.
I mean, then we're probably gonna have to come up with a lot of questions and maybe just get the word out to the community that if you have questions to bring it there. I was just thinking if there was some people that have been involved in the past that maybe know what's the right questions to ask or the right things that have not been touched on the previous studies to be touched on this study.
We could encourage them to come to the meeting.
yeah, I think we need to advertise. Okay.
Yeah,
Are we
it wasn't
clear?
gonna happen timely enough to where they were gonna meet before up to September 20th, I don't think.
So maybe just get the word out there and let
Yes.
people know and let them know that we're thinking about forming a committee if they want to be a part of it.
Tell Girdwood to get it well advertised too.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, council? Okay. Audience participation. So anyone in the audience or visitors who want to comment, now's time to do so.
Most of my time here. Kristen Carpenter, 507 4th Street, and because you all talked about looking into measures we could take to minimize bear interaction, there'd been some talk about what would it cost to retrofit the dumpsters, and I was just thinking, they don't all have to be done at once, you know, you can phase in a certain number over time, kind of cycle through. That's just a thought. And my other comment, I'm sorry I didn't mention it sooner, so it could be considered when you talked about the capital improvement project list, but for years when we talked about the Cordova Center, really was excited about an outdoor stairway, and that was the one thing that never got done for this building. So for my druthers, I would suggest, I would have said, and I will when you take it up again in December, actually taking off the Sawmill Avenue extension, because I think what we're talking about on this list are ways that we can facilitate pedestrian accessibility walking around town. And I don't know that Sawmill Avenue gets us that much, but this stairway here is a huge connector between what happens in the harbor and what happens on First Street, and this Adam Street is redone, there's obviously gonna be more accessibility for pedestrians there, so I'd really like to see the outdoor staircase added to that list to finish off this building. Thank you.
Kristen, Sawmill, was that like the causeway over to the ballparks, or?
I think it's been,
That one was eliminated.
it's behind Baja between, right, the area,
Oh, yeah.
where, by the skate park.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's just multiple
Yeah.
ways of doing business there, a trail, road, there was all kinds of.
Lots of things
But
that
the
got talked
causeway
about.
is out because of wording, it has to be navigable, and that makes it just
Okay.
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, yeah, that's, it might facilitate some traffic, I don't see that as the highest traffic, like the highest and best use of money if we get it to increase walkability around town, so. Like I said, for my brothers, I would say take it off the list and let's finish the outdoor stairway here.
That's a good reminder, because we haven't fully grown into the Cordova Center, and that's one of the design items that
Yeah,
is there.
and it's a key
Yeah.
connector, I think, between foot traffic around the harbor and getting up to First Street.
Yeah, and bird mitigation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other audience or visitor participation? Okay, council comments. Councilman Jones.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out and participating, and yeah, it's going to be bad. One thing I did pick up on, Kristen earlier, he said, Valdez is taking a lot of measures to help with their bear problem. They're experiencing the exact same thing we are this year. There's bears all over town, and I spent a couple weeks there. It was crazy. Never seen that before when I've been there. They might not have chickens, but they have rabbits. So, and as far as, the copper season, that's gonna be a big hit for our tax revenues. I know we all know that coming up. Another thing is we did get all of our escapements, the preliminary, counts from the Fish and Game website looked promising, and I've heard rumors that their tower counts on the Chinook are still low. So it's definitely one thing we're going to want to be keeping an eye on. It could be a canary in the coal mine that upriver users are taking way more out of the river than is being reported. And that's going to be a big battle in years to come at the Board of Fish level. And I hope that you guys are receptive to helping that battle.
Well, the other piece of that is Casey said they're not getting their brood. They don't have the brood stock they need at Volcana, so they're not seeing the reds show up.
And so they've been pointing the finger at us, blaming us for these issues for years, and now this year we didn't fish, and they're still having the issues. So we actually have science on our side.
Yes. Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Rich Rogers for his service to the city of Cordova. And then also to everyone that dealt with the water leak this week. That could have been a mess, but actually traffic flowed reasonably well. It wasn't too bad, so good job everyone. And yeah, tell your friends to submit letters of interest for the Trails Committee, and I don't know what other committees are still.
P&Z, and we're one short.
Okay.
And then I'm about to advertise for all of the November vacancies.
Well, volunteering is fun.
Thank you. Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I'd too like to thank everybody for coming. Thank Crystal for coming over from Girdwood. Wish us all well with the study. Thanks Leaf and staff for their work and continuing work on that. And just finally like to once again thank the newspaper and radio for being here and broadcasting and reporting on our activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Meyer.
Echo everything everyone said, and thanks for everyone for coming.
Councilman Burton.
No comment.
Councilman Guard.
I'll do the one in front of the no comment.
Okay.
Thank you all.
All right, one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.